From captives in exile to rebuilding the homeland, kindling hope amid the ruins. Our feature today: follow a single line through the return age. Grace and peace, everyone. Today we are going to understand the return age. The northern kingdom was taken captive by Assyria and scattered among the nations, never to return. The southern kingdom was taken captive by Babylon, and after 70 years, they returned in 3 waves. The captivity of the northern and southern kingdoms, along with the 3 returns. This is arguably the most complex and confusing history in the Bible. So we will sort it out piece by piece so that we can understand it and grasp its significance. Today, we are going to connect the timeline of the return age, condensing it with people and events into this line, and use a memory aid to remember it. The entire Bible consists of 12 ages: Patriarchal, Mosaic, Joshua, Judges, United Kingdom, Divided Kingdom, Exile, Return, Silent, Jesus, Church, and Last Days. Previously, we covered the Exile age. Today, we will move on to the Return age. The Return age has only 3 key points. The first return, build the temple. The second return, teach the law. The third return, rebuild the walls. Build the temple, teach the law, rebuild the walls. Later, I will show you a 3-word memory aid to remember them, and you won't forget. First, let us look at the genealogy of the kings of the divided kingdoms of Israel. After Solomon did not finish well in his later years, the kingdom split into north and south. The southern kingdom went from Rehoboam to Zedekiah. The northern kingdom went from Jeroboam to Hoshea. The northern kingdom had no good kings. The southern kingdom had 8 good kings. The worst of them all was Manasseh. The 4 major prophets are Isaiah, Jeremiah, Daniel, and Ezekiel, along with many other minor prophets. The northern kingdom had 5 prophets: Elijah, Elisha, Amos, Hosea, plus Jonah. The northern kingdom fell first to Assyria. Then, toward the end of the southern kingdom, Assyria itself also fell to Babylon. First comes the exile age, and after that comes the return. So here we will go over it repeatedly so that you become thoroughly familiar with it. During the 3 waves of exile, minor prophets also arose, Zephaniah and Habakkuk. Then Persia rose up and conquered Babylon, allowing 3 waves of return. The first return was led by Zerubbabel, who led the people to build the temple. The second return was led by Ezra the scribe, who taught them the law. The third return was led by Nehemiah, who led them to rebuild the walls. The minor prophets from this period include Joel, Haggai, Zechariah, Obadiah, and Malachi. The prophets connected to today's feature are Isaiah, Haggai, and Zechariah, who prophesied the return after 70 years of exile. Let us look at the scripture. This is what the Lord says: "When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my good promise to bring you back to this place." We know that the land of Canaan was the promised land God gave to Israel. Even though there were judgments, punishments, and discipline along the way, after the 70 years were completed, the Lord would still turn his favor toward them. This was the prophecy given through Jeremiah. Babylon was to the east, so we will trace this period from east to west. From the prophet's prophecy to the Persian king's decree, there were 3 returns. The first return, build the temple. The second return, teach the law. The third return, rebuild the walls. After this came Silent Age. What is worth noting about the Silent Age is that during the time of foreign oppression, the Maccabean revolt arose, along with the festival of Hanukkah, and later the coming of the Messiah, Jesus Christ. Before the exile, God had spoken through the prophets, and these prophecies were later fulfilled. After the 3 waves of exile to Babylon, the Persian king arose. Persia conquered Babylon and issued a decree allowing them to return. Let us quickly go through this history. Assyria destroyed the northern kingdom. Then Babylon arose and destroyed Assyria. Then Persia arose and destroyed Babylon. Then Alexander the Great of Greece arose and destroyed Persia. Alexander died young, leading to division. Then came the Roman era, which was the Jesus age. Isaiah's prophecy: "See, I will stir up against them. The Medes Babylon will be overthrown by God, like Sodom and Gomorrah." Just now, we saw that Isaiah lived during the middle to late period of the southern kingdom before the exile had taken place. Yet, God spoke through the prophet Isaiah, declaring that they would be taken captive to Babylon in 3 waves, and that the Persian-Median Empire would come to destroy Babylon. Because Persia was a composite empire, it is also called the Persian-Median Empire, here referred to as the Medes. Babylon would become like Sodom and Gomorrah, cities of great wickedness destroyed by God in an unusual way. Belshazzar, the last king of Babylon, was exceedingly arrogant. While the Persian army was besieging the city, he held a great feast in the palace, even using the vessels plundered from the temple in Jerusalem to drink wine. Then fingers appeared and wrote on the wall, but no one could interpret the writing. Daniel interpreted it for the king. The meaning was that God had numbered the days of his reign and brought it to an end. That very night, the Persians conquered Babylon. In the time of Cyrus, king of Persia, he issued a decree allowing Judah to return. The Persian king treated the Israelites well and provided all kinds of assistance. Just as they had suffered oppression from the Babylonian king 3 times, now they would receive support from the Persian king 3 times. All of this was from God. The earlier exile was discipline. The later return was restoration. The first return was to build the temple. It is recorded in Ezra, Haggai, and Zechariah. God stirred the heart of Cyrus, king of Persia, to fulfill his will. So Zerubbabel, the governor, led about 50,000 people back to build the temple. This first group was the largest. Zerubbabel was a descendant of David's royal line, so in a sense, he too was a king. Solomon built the temple. Zerubbabel rebuilt the temple. That is how we can remember it. Besides Zerubbabel, there was also Joshua the priest, who was the son of the high priest. We can imagine that both his father and grandfather had been high priests. His grandfather passed away during the exile. His father was likely taken to Babylon as well, and by this time was either very old or had also passed away. So here he is referred to as Joshua, the son of the high priest. God spoke through the prophets, telling them that they were wearing filthy garments. The priests had their priestly garments, the ephod, objects originally sanctified by God. So God himself would cleanse their filthy garments. After they returned to the land of Canaan, the first thing they did was offer sacrifices. Offering sacrifices carries the meaning of renewal, a new beginning. Just like Noah, after the floodwaters had gone down, the first thing he did was also offer sacrifices, turning his focus back to God, making God his first priority. Then they laid the foundation of the temple. Now, we know that from the 3rd wave of exile to the laying of the temple foundation, it was not actually 70 years. So some of the older people had seen the splendor of Solomon's temple before, and they wept with emotion. Rebuilding the temple was certainly a good thing, something to celebrate. So there were tears and joy. Some wept, some rejoiced. This scene is deeply meaningful and worth reflecting on. When they began to build the temple after laying the foundation, the Samaritans opposed them. At that time, Samaria was a province of Persia, located in the territory of the former northern kingdom. The Samaritans were not necessarily Israelites, because the northern kingdom had been exiled to various lands, and people from other nations had been brought in to settle there, resulting in a mixed population. This caused the construction of the temple to be delayed for more than 10 years. During those years, they got their priorities wrong again. They started building nicer houses for themselves, instead putting the temple project aside. So 2 prophets arose, Haggai and Zechariah, telling the people it's time to build the temple. The rebuilding of this temple was a process until the Messiah comes, when God himself will restore the fallen tent of David. What was taking place then was an initial fulfillment. It will be fulfilled again in the future, and on an even greater scale. Is it a time for you yourselves to be living in your paneled houses while this house remains a ruin? This was the prophet's reminder to them. You expected much, but see, it turned out to be little. What you brought home, I blew away. Why? Because of my house, which remains a ruin. While each of you is busy with your own house, the book of Haggai is already in the later part of the Old Testament. Although the temple was half built, the people kept seeking greater harvests, whether from livestock or crops, yet their yields were small. This was because God had blown it away. They had not put God first. God's house remains a ruin, while each person is busy with their own house, forming a striking contrast. Here, let us compare it with Matthew in the New Testament. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. So they responded to the reminder, overcame the obstacles, and continued rebuilding the temple until it was finished. This was the first return, the building of the temple. Let us go through the Old Testament prophets. I will recite the Old Testament books: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi. The Old Testament has 39 books. The book of Isaiah, which we mentioned earlier, is often described as a miniature Bible. During the time of the divided kingdom, it prophesied the exile, the return, and the Messiah. The minor prophets of the divided kingdom are Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, and Zephaniah. Then, during the time of the exile, the major prophets were Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel. Although Jeremiah and Lamentations are separate books, they come from the same prophet. So during the exile, there were 3 major prophets, and before them, Isaiah, making 4 major prophets in total. As for the minor prophets, from both the northern and southern kingdoms combined, there were 12. The prophets of the return were Ezra and Nehemiah. Today's content is mainly drawn from the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, along with Haggai and Zechariah. So those are the sections marked in purple. As for the prophets of the return, brothers and sisters, I encourage you to first memorize the table of contents of both the Old and New Testaments, and then carefully reflect on what each book represents. Remember to listen several times. Don't be discouraged if it feels confusing at first. Now, let us move on to the second return, teach the law. In the second return, Ezra taught them the law. Ezra was a scribe. The book of Ezra describes him this way. He was a teacher well versed in the law of Moses, which the Lord, the God of Israel, had given. So we refer to it simply as law. The number of men Ezra brought back was about 1,500, so including women and children, it was probably a few thousand people. When he returned, he saw that the people had intermarried with foreign nations. Was this matter really so important? Was it really that serious? Let us recall how Solomon did not finish well in his later years. It was because he married too many foreign wives. These foreign wives exerted pillow talk influence over him, to the point that Solomon even built temples for their gods and joined in idol worship. So the influence of marriage is enormous. It affected not only Solomon, but the entire nation, leading them into idolatry. When he saw this, he took it upon himself to confess on behalf of the people before God. The temple Zerubbabel built was an external temple. The return led by Ezra, the scribe, was about building an internal temple. The temple is where God dwells. So the work moved from building the temple to building up the people. He taught them that a holy people must be set apart. consecrated to God. When we eat unclean food, we become defiled, whether in eating, touching, or wearing, they were to be set apart. Of course, this refers to the Old Testament. If even eating and drinking and clothing can bring defilement, how much more when it comes to marriage? For in marriage, the two become one flesh. So, Ezra called on them to confess their sins and make a covenant to take concrete action by separating from their foreign wives and children. Such a demand may seem harsh and has sparked much debate and discussion. But we must understand that this was the nature of the covenant God had made with Israel. If there is anything we love, whether people, things, or relationships, that causes us to turn away from God and fail to put Him first, we must let it go. Of course, in the New Testament application, the principle is to put God first. If we have an unbelieving spouse, child, or relative, we are to share the gospel with them as soon as possible and pray for them. But here, in the Old Testament, this was the requirement of the law for Israel. The third return was about rebuilding the walls. At that time, Nehemiah was a high official of Persia, the cupbearer to the king. Being a cupbearer was not simply about tasting the king's wine. He was one of the king's closest officials. He would taste the wine before the king drank it, and he also oversaw the planting, harvesting, winemaking, and storage of the vineyards. He held a high position, but his heart was with his people. He received news from Judah. Those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire. Here we come to Nehemiah chapter 1. After the first two returns, it speaks of those who survived the exile and are back in the province, the remnant of Israel, the delivered ones. They were in great trouble because they had no walls. The walls had been destroyed when Babylon conquered Jerusalem, so Nehemiah was deeply distressed. The Persian king saw his concern and supported his third return. After returning to his homeland, Nehemiah the cupbearer became governor of the province of Judah. He brought with him some officials, craftsmen, materials, and key personnel, so the group was not large in number. When he arrived, he went out at night to inspect the condition of the walls. Nehemiah was highly skilled in leadership and went to the front lines to assess the real situation. So he called the people together and assigned them to work with great efficiency. At the same time, the surrounding foreign peoples continued to interfere with their work on the walls. Let us look at a map, the opposition faced during the return age. We can use the map of the divided kingdom to help us understand. The return was centered mainly in the region of Judah. The northern kingdom had become the province of Samaria, which was on the same level as the province of Judah. Both were provinces of the Persian Empire. During this time, the governor of Samaria falsely accused Nehemiah of planning a rebellion, which caused the work to be halted. There was opposition from the north, from the Ammonites, from the Arabs, and from the Philistines, opposition from every direction. On top of that, internally, some prophets and individuals were bribed. So in a sense, it was a time of external threats and internal conflict. Nehemiah gathered the people and organized the work. They worked with one hand and held a weapon with the other, guarding against interference and resisting the schemes of evil men, including all kinds of intimidation and infiltration. Remarkably, they completed the wall in just 52 days. Throughout this process, the book of Nehemiah describes how they not only worked with one hand and held a weapon with the other, but even kept their clothes on at all times, ready to rise up and fight at any moment. From this, we learn that earthly administrative skills can be used by God. Nehemiah organized them so efficiently that the enemies had no time to react before the work was done. After the wall was completed, he joined Ezra the scribe in reading the law to the people. So at this point, Ezra from the second return and Nehemiah from the third return overlapped in time. Together, they continued to govern and guide the people. There were many social injustices, people failing to observe the Sabbath properly, conducting business as usual. This is why Jesus said that no one can serve both God and money. The Sabbath was established by God as a day of rest. At the same time, the problem of intermarriage with foreign nations also remained. Nehemiah transitioned from being a high official, the king's cupbearer, to becoming the governor of the province of Judah. His heart was set on the things of God's kingdom and on his own people, whom he loved. Let us now go through the support each of the three leaders received from the Persian king. For the first return, Zerubbabel received the temple vessels and a decree to build the temple, enabling them to restore the place of worship. Cyrus, king of Persia, returned the vessels of the temple and issued the decree. Because the empire was vast, this decree gave them the authority they needed. So this was about building the temple. The focus was on God. For the second return, Ezra received gold and silver, along with judicial and educational authority. For the Jewish people, this meant teaching the law of God. For the Persian king, it served the interests of imperial governance. So this was about restoring the law and the life of faith. The focus was on teaching the law, reaching the hearts of the people. For the third return, Nehemiah received timber, military support, and authorization to rebuild the walls. He was even granted access to the king's forest to cut suitable timber for the walls, the gates, and the surrounding structures. This restored physical defenses and brought long-term stability. The focus of the third return was on rebuilding the walls and the community, because the walls protected the community. That community had a king. The heavenly king was the Lord, and the earthly king was the king of Persia. As they were gathered together, their long-term security was assured. In terms of our faith today, our first focus is to turn to God. Then, inwardly, we are to be renewed, to draw near to God, to meet with Him, to understand His law, and to love Him by keeping His commandments. From there, it extends outward to the community, church life, fellowship, relationships, growing strong, and being built up together. After the return came the silent age. Let us briefly touch on this transition. The last prophet of the return age was Malachi. After the three returns, we might think that from then on, they lived happily ever after with a bright future. But Malachi warned them. The priests had become corrupt. The people were offering defective sacrifices, intermarrying with foreign nations, and neglecting the tithe. The tithe was a system established for the people of Israel. Among the 12 tribes, the Levites served as priests, dedicated to serving God full-time. The other 11 tribes were to give 1/10 of their produce to support these servants of God. Without the tithe, this system of faith could not be sustained. The last book of the Old Testament, Malachi, addresses the issue of tithing. The literary style of the book of Malachi is quite distinctive. It uses a question and answer format. God declares the people's problems, and the people and priests respond by asking, "How have we sinned against you? In what way have we done wrong?" Then, God, through the prophet, sets them straight in detail and warns them, going back and forth. The last verse of Malachi, in other words, the last verse of the entire Old Testament, is the conclusion of the Old Testament, and it carries great weight. "See, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before that great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. He will turn the hearts of the parents to their children, and the hearts of the children to their parents, or else I will come and strike the land with total destruction." Here it says, the great and dreadful day of the Lord. It speaks of both judgment and salvation. "I will send the prophet Elijah to you." The prophet Elijah refers to John the Baptist, who came before Jesus began his ministry to prepare the way for him. The key point is, he would turn the hearts of the parents to their children, and the hearts of the children to their parents. Spiritually speaking, this means the heart of the Heavenly Father turns to his children, and the hearts of the children turn to the Father. Jesus said, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." So Jesus, the one and only Son of God, came into this world to turn us back to our Heavenly Father, so that he would not come and strike the land with total destruction. We desire blessing, not destruction. Jesus Christ is that way, the way to the Father, the way of blessing, and the way that spares us from destruction. After this came the silent age, about 400 years until the coming of Christ. Later, we will continue our series, follow a single line through the silent age. During those 400 years, meaningful events also took place, leading up to the coming of Jesus Christ. Today, we cover the fulfillment of the return after 70 years of exile. First, build the temple. Second, teach the law. Third, rebuild the walls, representing the three returns. The system of our Follow a Single Line series. The main line is follow a single line through the entire Bible. Like the trunk of a great tree, it branches out into 12 ages. Patriarchal, Mosaic, Joshua, Judges, United Kingdom, Divided Kingdom, Exile, Return, Silent, Jesus, Church, and Last Days. Today is about the return age. Here is a small reminder. The content of this session requires a certain level of familiarity with the Old Testament, so feel free to listen to it a few times. If you didn't fully catch it the first time, that is completely normal. I spend a great deal of time on the Follow a Single Line series, especially the ages of the Divided Kingdom, the Exile, and the Return, which are quite complex, and I had to carefully select the key events. Just a joke. If you understood everything on the first try, I'd be out of a job. So listen to it a few times. I myself often listen to it again, like browsing through notes. Finally, let us do a quick overview. Follow a single line through the return age. The return age has three key points: the temple, the law, and the wall. Here is a quick way to remember them. Inside the temple is the law, outside is the wall. The whole point of the return age was to build the temple. So, the three-word memory aid is temple, law, wall. The first return, build the temple. The Persian king issued a decree, and Governor Zerubbabel led the return, enabling them to build a temple. They first offered sacrifices, then laid the foundation. They encountered opposition, causing delays. Then the prophets spoke up. It's time to build the temple. The second return, teach the law. When Ezra the scribe saw the people's sin, he confessed on their behalf, taught them the law, made a covenant with the people, separated from their foreign wives and children, and called them to be set apart as holy. This was the second return, teach the law. The third return, rebuild the walls. Nehemiah the cupbearer led the third return and later became governor of Judah. He first inspected the broken down walls, then gathered the people and organized them with great efficiency, completing the work in 52 days. They resisted external threats and internal conflict, working with one hand and holding a weapon with the other. After that, he joined Ezra the scribe in reading the law to the people and governing them. Today's content, the three returns. Keywords: temple, law, wall. They rebuilt the temple. Inside it was the law. Outside it was the wall. Temple, law, wall. Follow a single line through the return age. Please review it a few times, reflect on it repeatedly, and grasp the meaning within. Blessed is the one whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. Fine food, 7 minutes. See you tomorrow.